Have you ever wondered whether helping your child in every difficulty might in fact be hurting them? Picture this. Your adult child calls you in tears, facing yet another crisis they seemingly can't handle alone. Your heart breaks, your protective instincts surge, and you immediately spring into action to fix their problem. But what if that rescue mission, however well-intentioned, is actually preventing them from developing the very strength they need to thrive? What if stepping back at the right moments is the most loving thing you can do? The hardest lesson many parents must learn is that sometimes love means not helping. It means standing beside your child, quietly offering confidence in their ability to rise, rather than rushing in to lift them up every single time. As parents, we are wired to protect, to solve, to shield our children from pain and failure. This instinct serves us beautifully when they are young and truly dependent on our guidance and intervention. However, as our children grow into teenagers and young adults, this same protective impulse can become a barrier to their development. When we consistently remove obstacles from their path, we inadvertently rob them of the chance to build resilience, problem-solving skills, and self-confidence. We create what psychologists call learned helplessness, where our children begin to believe they cannot handle challenges without our constant support. The very foundation of their independence crumbles beneath the weight of our good intentions. The consequences of overhelping extend far beyond delayed maturity or prolonged dependence. When we rescue our children from every consequence, we send them a subtle but devastating message. We don't believe they are capable of handling life's challenges on their own. This lack of faith in their abilities becomes internalized, creating adults who doubt their own judgment, fear taking risks, and struggle with decision-making. They become paralyzed by the possibility of failure because they have never learned that failure is not only survivable, but often essential for growth. Our children begin to see themselves through the lens of our constant intervention rather than their own inherent strength and capability. The ancient Stoics understood this principle deeply, teaching that true strength comes not from avoiding difficulties, but from learning to navigate them with wisdom and grace. They recognized that resilience is like a muscle that must be exercised to grow stronger, and that shielding someone from all resistance ultimately weakens them. When we apply this wisdom to parenting, we discover that there are critical moments when our instinct to intervene should be tempered by restraint and trust. These moments require us to act against every parental fiber in our being, to watch our children struggle while we stand back and believe in their capacity to overcome. It is perhaps the most challenging aspect of raising independent, confident adults. In this discussion, we will explore the delicate balance between supporting and enabling, between being present and being intrusive. You will learn to recognize the critical moments when holding back becomes an act of profound love and trust. We will examine how stepping back at the right times allows our children to develop the very qualities we most want them to possess: resilience, self-reliance, problem-solving abilities, and unshakable confidence in their own worth. Through understanding these principles, you will discover that parenting with restraint is not abandonment, but rather the ultimate expression of faith in your child's inherent strength and potential. To illustrate this, let me tell you a story about two parents who learned this lesson through their own struggles and victories. Grace Whitlow lived in a small coastal town with her 17-year-old son Noah. Since her husband had left several years earlier, she had poured all her energy into being both mother and father to her boy. She packed his lunches each morning, managed his school assignments, reminded him of important deadlines, and even negotiated with his teachers when his grades slipped. Grace believed that this level of involvement demonstrated her love and commitment. But she was beginning to notice troubling changes in Noah as he approached adulthood. Noah had become increasingly passive, waiting for his mother to handle problems rather than addressing them himself. When faced with challenges, he would quickly become frustrated and turn to Grace for solutions rather than working through difficulties on his own. His confidence seemed to shrink with each passing month, and he appeared uncertain about even the simplest decisions. Grace found herself constantly worrying about how he would manage when it came time for college or entering the workforce. The more she tried to prepare him by handling things for him, the less prepared he seemed to become. One evening, after a particularly heated argument about Noah's future plans, Grace's older brother Ezra visited their home. Ezra was a pragmatic man who had raised 3 successful children of his own, and he had been watching his sister's approach to parenting with growing concern. As Grace vented her frustrations about Noah's lack of initiative and self-direction, Ezra listened quietly before reaching into his bag and pulling out a worn paperback book on Stoic philosophy. He placed it gently on the kitchen table between them and looked directly into his sister's eyes. "Grace," Ezra said softly, "if you always remove the weight, he'll never grow the muscle." Those words hit Grace like a physical blow, not because they were harsh, but because they carried the ring of undeniable truth. She realized in that moment that her constant intervention, her endless problem-solving on Noah's behalf, might be the very thing preventing him from developing the strength and confidence he would need as an adult. The book Ezra had brought contained wisdom that would guide Grace through a fundamental shift in her approach to parenting, teaching her when to step forward and when to step back. If you're finding value in this perspective on parenting, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more wisdom on navigating life's challenges with grace and purpose. That night, Grace sat alone in her living room, turning the pages of the book Ezra had given her. The ancient wisdom of the Stoics spoke to something deep within her, challenging everything she thought she knew about love and protection. She read about the importance of allowing people to face their own challenges, about the difference between caring for someone and controlling their experiences. The philosophers wrote about resilience as a quality that could only be developed through practice, through facing difficulties head-on, rather than having them removed by well-meaning others. As she read, Grace began to understand that her constant intervention in Noah's life was not preparing him for independence, but rather creating a dependency that would serve neither of them well in the long run. The next morning brought an immediate test of Grace's newfound understanding. Noah burst into the kitchen in a state of panic, his face flushed with anxiety and his hands shaking as he held his phone. He had just discovered that he had missed the deadline for a significant college scholarship by 3 days. The scholarship was worth $15,000 annually and would have made his dream school financially possible. Grace's first instinct was to grab her own phone and call the scholarship committee to explain the situation and plead for an extension. She had done this sort of thing before, and her charm and persistence had often succeeded in getting Noah second chances he probably didn't deserve. But as she reached for her phone, Ezra's words echoed in her mind. "If you always remove the weight, he'll never grow the muscle." Grace forced herself to pause, to take a deep breath, and to consider what would truly serve Noah best in this situation. She looked at her son, who was clearly expecting her to spring into action as she always had, and made one of the most difficult decisions of her parenting journey. Instead of reaching for her phone, she sat down at the kitchen table and looked Noah directly in the eyes. "I'm not going to call them for you," Grace said quietly, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her heart. Noah's expression shifted from panic to disbelief to anger in the span of seconds. He couldn't understand why his mother, who had always been his advocate and protector, was suddenly abandoning him in his moment of need. He accused her of not caring, of giving up on his future, of being cruel and unsupportive. Each word felt like a knife in Grace's chest, but she held firm to her decision. She explained that missing the deadline was a natural consequence of his failure to stay organized, and that learning to accept such consequences was an essential part of growing up. The argument that followed was intense and painful. Noah stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him, and didn't return until well after dinner. Grace spent the day second-guessing herself, wondering if she was being too harsh, if this particular situation might have warranted an exception to her new approach. But when Noah finally came home that evening, something had shifted. He didn't apologize immediately, but there was a different quality to his silence. Over the following days, Grace noticed that he had started using a planner to track important dates and deadlines. He had researched other scholarship opportunities on his own initiative and had even scheduled meetings with his school counselor to discuss alternative funding options for college. The second test came just 3 weeks later when Noah lost his part-time job at the local marina. He'd been working there for 6 months, helping with boat maintenance and customer service, but his supervisor had grown tired of Noah's frequent tardiness and casual attitude toward punctuality. When Noah called Grace in tears to tell her what had happened, her immediate impulse was to march down to the marina and speak with the manager. She knew the owner personally and was confident she could smooth things over, perhaps frame Noah's dismissal as a misunderstanding that could be resolved with a sincere apology and a promise of improved behavior. Instead, Grace listened to Noah's version of events and then asked him a simple question. "What do you think you could have done differently?" The question caught Noah off guard because he had expected her to immediately begin planning his rescue. As he talked through the situation, he began to acknowledge his own role in what had happened. He admitted that he had been consistently late, that he had treated the job as optional rather than as a real responsibility, and that his supervisor had warned him multiple times about his attitude. Grace could see the wheels turning in Noah's mind as he processed these realizations. Rather than begging his former employer for a second chance, Noah spent the weekend reflecting on his work habits and writing out a plan for how he would approach his next job differently. He created a morning routine that would ensure he arrived early rather than on time, and he researched what employers valued most in teenage workers. When he applied for a new position at a local restaurant, he was able to speak honestly about what he had learned from losing his previous job. The restaurant manager was impressed by his maturity and self-awareness, and Noah was hired on the spot. The third pivotal moment arose when Noah's best friend since childhood, Marcus, suddenly stopped talking to him. The two boys had been inseparable throughout middle school and high school, but a disagreement over a girl they both liked had escalated into harsh words and hurt feelings. Noah came to Grace in distress, wanting her to call Marcus's mother and arrange a reconciliation. He felt that adult intervention would solve the problem quickly and restore their friendship to its previous state. Grace's maternal instincts urged her to protect Noah from the pain of a lost friendship, to smooth over the conflict, as she had done so many times before when the boys were younger. But Grace recognized this as another opportunity for Noah to develop crucial life skills. She gently explained that friendships, especially at his age, required him to take responsibility for his own words and actions. She reminded him that learning to navigate relationship conflicts was an essential skill he would need throughout his life, in college, in future romantic relationships, and in his career. Rather than calling Marcus's mother, Grace encouraged Noah to reflect on his role in the conflict and to decide for himself whether the friendship was worth fighting for. Noah spent several days wrestling with the situation. He wrote and rewrote text messages to Marcus, trying to find the right words to express his feelings. He practiced potential conversations with himself in the mirror, working through different scenarios and responses. Finally, he chose to approach Marcus directly at school, offering a genuine apology for his part in their disagreement and expressing how much their friendship meant to him. The conversation was awkward and emotional, but it resulted in a reconciliation that was stronger than their previous relationship because it was built on mutual respect and honest communication rather than adult-mediated compromise. The fourth and most challenging test came when Noah was preparing for his driving test. He had failed his first attempt, primarily due to nervousness and a few minor technical errors. As the date for his second attempt approached, Noah's anxiety began to build. He became convinced that he would fail again and started talking about postponing the test until he felt more confident. Grace's immediate instinct was to reassure him that postponing was a reasonable option, that there was no shame in waiting until he felt ready, and that she would call the Department of Motor Vehicles to reschedule. Instead, Grace recognized this as a crucial moment for Noah to learn about, facing fears and challenges rather than avoiding them. She listened to his concerns with empathy and understanding, but she did not offer to make the phone call that would rescue him from his anxiety. She reminded him that confidence often comes from doing difficult things rather than from feeling ready to do them, and that postponing the test would likely only increase his nervousness over time. She shared stories from her own life about times when she had felt unprepared but had chosen to move forward anyway, and how those experiences had built her resilience and self-trust. Noah was not happy with his mother's response. He had expected her support to take the form of helping him avoid the challenge rather than encouraging him to face it. The night before his driving test, he was irritable and anxious, snapping at Grace and muttering about how other parents would be more understanding. Grace spent that evening questioning her approach once again, wondering if she was pushing too hard or expecting too much from her 17-year-old son. But she held firm to her belief that Noah needed to learn to move through fear rather than around it. The morning of the test, Noah was quiet and tense as Grace drove him to the testing center. She offered a few words of encouragement, but resisted the urge to suggest that they could reschedule if he wasn't feeling ready. As they sat in the parking lot waiting for his appointment time, Noah took several deep breaths and said something that surprised them both. "I'm scared, but I think I need to do this." Those words revealed that he was beginning to understand the value of facing challenges despite feeling unprepared or nervous. Noah passed his driving test that day, but more importantly, he experienced the profound satisfaction that comes from moving through fear rather than being rescued from it. He had learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of fear. This lesson would serve him well in countless future situations where he would need to make difficult decisions, take risks, or face uncertainty without the safety net of his mother's intervention. Each of these 4 moments brought Grace tremendous heartache, but they also filled her with pride as she watched Noah begin to transform. She noticed that he stood taller, spoke with more confidence, and approached new challenges with curiosity rather than immediate anxiety. He began making decisions independently and taking ownership of both his successes and his failures. Most importantly, he stopped looking to her for constant validation and guidance, developing instead an internal compass that would serve him well as he moved toward true adulthood. The changes in Noah were remarkable and encouraging, but perhaps the most significant transformation was in Grace herself. She discovered that stepping back from her role as constant problem solver allowed her to become a different kind of support system for her son. Instead of managing his life, she became a trusted advisor who offered wisdom when asked, but respected his autonomy to make his own choices. Their relationship evolved from one of dependence to one of mutual respect, and Grace found that she enjoyed and respected Noah more as he became increasingly self-reliant and confident. Grace's journey illustrates 4 critical moments where Parental restraint becomes an act of love. When our children face consequences of procrastination, we must let them feel the weight of missed deadlines rather than rescuing them from natural outcomes. When they fail due to their own mistakes, we must resist the urge to fix their problems and instead allow failure to become their teacher. When they struggle in personal relationships, we must give them space to resolve conflicts without our interference, trusting them to navigate the complex terrain of human connection. And when they express fear or panic about challenges, we must offer reassurance without removing the challenge itself, helping them understand that growth comes from moving through difficulty rather than around it. If you're recognizing yourself in Grace's story and want to learn more about parenting with wisdom and restraint, please subscribe to our channel for more insights on raising independent, resilient adults. While Grace's story shows us the challenges of learning restraint with a teenage child transitioning to adulthood, the principles of loving through stepping back become even more complex when dealing with fully grown children. To help you see this more clearly, I want to tell you another story that captures this perfectly, one that illustrates how these same principles apply when our children have already reached adulthood, but remain emotionally and financially dependent on our continued rescue efforts. Reed Callahan was a retired engineer in his early 60s who lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Since losing his wife to cancer 3 years earlier, he had thrown himself into supporting his 28-year-old daughter Zara with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Reed's grief had transformed into a fierce protective instinct toward his only child, and he convinced himself that helping her succeed in her small graphic design business was the best way to honor his late wife's memory. What Reed didn't realize was that his constant intervention was actually undermining the very success he was trying to ensure. Zara had started her design business with genuine talent and enthusiasm, but as challenges arose, she had increasingly turned to her father for solutions. Reed was always ready with advice, financial support, connections through his professional network, and logistical assistance. He helped her set up her home office, managed her bookkeeping, researched potential clients, and even handled difficult customer service calls when tensions arose. Reed believed that this level of involvement demonstrated his love and commitment to Zara's dreams, but the more he helped, the more paralyzed she seemed to become. Reed's awakening came through his longtime friend, Lena Morell, a retired counselor who had known the family for decades. Lena had been watching Reed's relationship with Zara with growing concern, recognizing patterns she had seen in her professional practice with families who struggled with boundaries and codependency. During one of their regular coffee meetings, as Reed detailed his latest efforts to solve Zara's business problems, Lena gently interrupted him with words that would change everything. "Reed," Lena said softly, placing her hand over his on the table, "maybe it's time to let her try without your safety net." The suggestion hit Reed like a physical blow because it challenged everything he believed about being a good father and honoring his wife's memory. Lena explained that his constant rescue efforts were sending Zara an unintended message, that he didn't believe she was capable of handling her own life. She suggested that true love sometimes meant stepping back and trusting in someone's inherent strength, even when that trust felt terrifying. That conversation planted a seed of doubt in Reed's mind about his approach to supporting Zara. Over the following weeks, he began to notice how his daughter's confidence seemed to diminish rather than grow, despite all his help. She second-guessed every decision, constantly sought his approval before taking action, and seemed to panic at the first sign of any business challenge. Reed realized that his safety net had become a trap, preventing Zara from developing the resilience and self-reliance she would need to build a truly successful business and life. The first test of Reed's new understanding came when Zara called him in tears about an angry client who was threatening legal action. The client claimed that Zara had not delivered the website design according to their specifications and was demanding a full refund plus compensation for lost business opportunities. Zara was in a state of panic, convinced that she would be sued and that her business would be destroyed. Reed's immediate instinct was to call his attorney and have him handle the situation professionally and discreetly, as he had done with other client disputes in the past. Instead, Reed took a deep breath and asked Zara to walk him through exactly what had happened with this client. As she explained the situation, it became clear that there had been miscommunication about the project scope and timeline, but that the client's threats were likely more bluster than substance. Rather than hiring his attorney to handle the situation, Reed encouraged Zara to seek professional legal advice on her own and to approach the conflict as a learning opportunity rather than a catastrophe. He offered emotional support and listened to her concerns, but he did not step in to solve the problem for her. Zara was initially angry and confused by her father's response. She had expected him to immediately spring into action, as he always had, and his sudden restraint felt like abandonment during her time of need. She accused him of not caring about her business or her future, of leaving her to handle a situation that was beyond her capabilities. Reed's heart broke as he listened to her accusations, but he held firm to his decision to let her navigate this challenge independently. Over the following days, Zara researched business law, consulted with a legal aid attorney, and developed a strategy for addressing the client's concerns. She discovered that the threatened legal action was unlikely to materialize and that the client's demands were unreasonable given the actual terms of their agreement. More importantly, she learned how to communicate professionally with difficult clients and how to protect herself with clearer contracts and documentation. By the end of the week, she had resolved the dispute through calm, professional negotiation and had gained confidence in her ability to handle similar challenges in the future. The second critical moment arose when Zara defaulted on a business loan payment. She had taken out the loan to upgrade her equipment and software, but a series of late client payments had left her temporarily unable to meet her obligations. Zara called Reed in distress, explaining that the bank was charging late fees and threatening to report the default to credit agencies. She asked him to loan her the money to catch up on the payment, promising to pay him back as soon as her clients paid their outstanding invoices. Reed's natural instinct was to immediately transfer the money to Zara's account and worry about repayment. Later, he had the resources to cover the payment easily, and watching his daughter struggle with financial stress was painful for him. However, he remembered Lena's advice about allowing Zara to experience the natural consequences of her business decisions. Instead of writing a check, Reed sat with Zara at her kitchen table and helped her work through a realistic repayment plan that she could manage on her own. Together, they reviewed her cash flow, identified which clients owed money and when payments were expected, and calculated a timeline for catching up on the loan. Reed provided emotional support and practical advice about managing business finances, but he did not provide the financial rescue that Zara had requested. Initially, Zara was frustrated and hurt by her father's refusal to bail her out, especially since she knew he had the means to solve her problem instantly. However, as Zara worked through the repayment plan on her own, she gained valuable insights into business financial management that would serve her for years to come. She learned to create more accurate cash flow projections, to build payment terms into her contracts that protected her from late-paying clients, and to maintain an emergency fund for unexpected expenses. Most importantly, she discovered that she was capable of solving complex financial problems independently, which gave her confidence to handle future business challenges without immediately turning to her father for rescue. The third pivotal moment came when Zara expressed interest in moving out of Reed's house and into her own apartment. Since her mother's death, Zara had been living with Reed ostensibly to help him through his grief, but the arrangement had become comfortable and convenient for both of them. Reed enjoyed having his daughter's company and felt less lonely with her presence in the house. Zara appreciated the financial savings and the emotional security of living with her father. However, as Zara approached 30, she began to feel that continuing to live at home was holding her back from full adulthood and independence. When Zara tentatively brought up the subject of finding her own place, Reed's first instinct was to discourage her from moving out. He worried about her ability to manage living expenses while building her business, and he was honest enough to admit that he dreaded the loneliness that would return when she left. Reed found himself suggesting that she wait until her business was more established, that the current arrangement was working well for both of them, and that moving out might create financial stress that could harm her entrepreneurial efforts. But as Reed reflected on his conversation with Lena and his recent experiences with stepping back, he realized that his desire to keep Zara at home was more about his own comfort than her best interests. He recognized that encouraging her to maintain the safety and security of living with him might be preventing her from developing the full confidence and independence she needed as an adult. Despite his personal reluctance, Reed chose to support Zara's desire for independence rather than asking her to stay for his comfort. Reed helped Zara research apartments and calculate realistic budgets, but he did not offer to subsidize her rent or provide financial guarantees to landlords. He shared practical advice about apartment hunting and lease agreements based on his own experience, but he let Zara make all the decisions about location, price range, and amenities. When Zara found a small apartment that she loved but worried about affording, Reed resisted the urge to offer financial assistance and instead encouraged her to trust her own judgment about what she could manage. The transition to independent living was challenging for Zara, but it was also transformative. She learned to manage a household budget, to prioritize expenses, and to make decisions about her living situation based on her own values and preferences rather than her father's opinions. More importantly, she discovered that she enjoyed the sense of autonomy and self-reliance that came with having her own space. Her relationship with Reed actually improved as they shifted from a parent-child dynamic under the same roof to an adult friendship with healthy boundaries. The fourth and most significant test came when Zara began expressing serious doubts about continuing her design business. After several years of ups and downs, she was questioning whether entrepreneurship was the right path for her or whether she should look for traditional employment with a steady salary and benefits. This uncertainty was particularly painful for Reed because he had invested so much emotional energy into supporting her business dreams, and he felt that her potential abandonment of entrepreneurship might represent a failure on his part as a supportive father. Reed's initial response was to immediately begin problem-solving and strategizing ways to reinvigorate Zara's passion for her business. He wanted to research market trends, identify new client opportunities, suggest business pivots that might reignite her enthusiasm, and remind her of all the progress she had already made. His instinct was to convince her that giving up would be a mistake and to provide the encouragement and resources that would help her push through this difficult period. Instead, Reed forced himself to simply listen to Zara's concerns without immediately jumping into solution mode. He asked thoughtful questions about her feelings and motivations, but he did not try to talk her out of her doubts or convince her to continue with her business. Reed recognized that this decision was deeply personal and that Zara needed the space to explore her own feelings and priorities without pressure from him to choose the path he preferred. As Zara talked through her thoughts and feelings with her father's supportive but non-directive listening, she was able to clarify her own values and goals in a way that hadn't been possible when Reed was constantly offering solutions and encouragement. She realized that while she enjoyed design work, she valued stability and collaboration more than the isolation and uncertainty of entrepreneurship. After careful consideration, she decided to close her business and accept a position with a local marketing firm where she could use her design skills in a team environment with steady income and benefits. Reed's decision to trust Zara's judgment, rather than trying to influence her choice, proved to be wise. Zara thrived in her new position, finding fulfillment in collaborative work and relief from the constant stress of business ownership. More importantly, she gained confidence in her ability to make major life decisions independently and to change course when something wasn't working, rather than persisting out of obligation or fear of disappointing others. As Reed learned to step back from his role as constant problem solver and safety net, he discovered that his relationship with Zara became richer and more genuine. Instead of relating to her as a dependent who needed his management and support, he began to see her as a capable adult whose judgment he could trust and respect. Zara, in turn, began to approach her father not as a source of rescue, but as a trusted advisor whose wisdom she valued, but whose approval she no longer desperately needed. Reed's journey illustrates 4 additional critical moments where parental restraint becomes an expression of love. When our adult children face professional conflicts or legal challenges, we must guide them toward resources and support rather than stepping in to handle the situation ourselves. When they experience financial hardship due to their own choices, we can provide guidance and emotional support without providing financial rescue that prevents them from learning essential money management skills. When they express desire for independence and autonomy, we must encourage their growth even when it leaves us feeling vulnerable or lonely. And when they question major life decisions or career paths, we must trust their judgment and support their right to change direction rather than trying to convince them to stay on paths that no longer serve them. If you're finding yourself in similar situations and want more guidance on loving your adult children through stepping back, please like this video to let us know this content is helpful to you. From Grace's journey with 17-year-old Noah and Reed's experience with 28-year-old Zara, we can distill 8 critical moments when stepping back becomes the most loving thing a parent can do. These moments represent opportunities to transform our relationships with our children from dependency to mutual respect, from constant rescue to trusted support. Each situation requires us to act against our deepest parental instincts, but the rewards for both parent and child are immeasurable. The first critical moment comes when your child faces the consequences of procrastination. Whether it's a missed scholarship deadline like Noah experienced or a forgotten project that threatens their grade, your instinct will be to call, negotiate, and smooth over the situation. Instead, let them feel the full weight of missed deadlines and learn that time management is a skill they must develop for themselves. The temporary disappointment they experience will teach them lessons that your rescue efforts never could. The second moment arrives when they fail due to their own mistakes. When your child loses a job because of tardiness, fails a class due to poor study habits, or faces rejection because of inadequate preparation, resist the urge to fix their problems or make excuses for them. Allow failure to become their teacher, understanding that the lessons learned from natural consequences are far more powerful than any lecture you could give. Your role is to offer emotional support while they process what went wrong and how to do better next time. The third critical moment emerges when they struggle in their personal relationships. Whether it's a friendship conflict like Noah faced with Marcus or a romantic relationship challenge, avoid the temptation to intervene, mediate, or offer solutions. Give them space to resolve conflicts without your interference, trusting them to navigate the complex terrain of human relationships. The communication skills and emotional intelligence they develop through handling their own relationship challenges will serve them throughout their lives. The fourth moment occurs when they express fear or panic about a challenge ahead. Like Noah's anxiety about his driving test, your child may want to postpone, avoid, or have you remove obstacles that seem overwhelming. Offer reassurance and emotional support, but don't remove the challenge itself. Help them understand that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite being afraid. These moments teach them that they are stronger and more capable than they realize. The fifth critical moment involves financial hardship due to poor choices. When your adult child, like Zara, faces loan defaults, credit problems, or money management challenges, guide them toward resources and help them create realistic plans rather than providing immediate financial rescue. Let them learn essential money management skills through experience. Understanding that financial literacy comes from handling real consequences rather than theoretical discussions about budgeting. The sixth moment requires wisdom when they hesitate about major life decisions. Whether it's choosing a college, selecting a career path, or deciding where to live, listen without dictating and let them own their choices. Your role is to ask thoughtful questions that help them clarify their own values and priorities, not to convince them to choose the path you would prefer. Trust their judgment even when their decisions make you uncomfortable or uncertain. The seventh critical moment comes when they encounter professional setbacks or conflicts. Like Zara's client dispute, these situations trigger our protective instincts and desire to use our connections, experience, or resources to solve their problems. Instead, guide them toward appropriate resources and support their learning process, while letting them recover and grow from their career challenges. The professional skills and confidence they develop by handling these situations independently will serve them far better than your intervention ever could. The eighth, and perhaps most difficult moment arrives when they want to step away from your influence or support system. Whether it's moving out of your home, declining your financial assistance, or choosing independence over security, encourage their autonomy even when it leaves you feeling vulnerable, lonely, or unnecessary. Remember that the goal of parenting is to raise independent adults who can thrive without constant support, not to maintain relationships based on dependency. These 8 moments represent a fundamental shift in how we express love to our growing children. Parenting with restraint is not abandonment or lack of caring. It is the ultimate expression of trust in your child's inherent strength, resilience, and capability. It requires tremendous courage to stand beside your child during difficult times, rather than rushing in to fix their problems. But this courage creates space for them to discover their own power and wisdom. As you reflect on your own relationships with your children, consider which of these 8 moments you might be approaching. With rescue rather than restraint, think about the messages your current responses send about your confidence in their abilities. How might stepping back in key situations actually strengthen your relationship and their self-reliance? What fears or needs of your own might be driving your desire to constantly help and intervene? The transformation you witnessed in both Noah and Zara is available to your children as well, but it requires your willingness to trust the process of growth through challenge. Your children are stronger than you think, more resilient than you fear, and more capable than your protective instincts believe. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is not to help, not to rescue, but simply to stand beside them with quiet confidence in their ability to rise to meet whatever life brings their way. If this message has inspired you to reconsider your approach to parenting with love and restraint, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more wisdom on navigating life's challenges with grace and purpose.